About a year ago, Microsoft put together all of its talent development and talent management and staffing into one global talent organization, which is what I do. And it's kind of a trend. So if you talk to a lot of big companies like I do, you actually see, instead of them breaking those things apart, you see them putting together. And in some cases, it's for cost reasons, and hopefully, there is the kind of strategic benefit that we all think you can get by making those functions work together. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we could have talked about the difference in the way that we needed to do staffing, and some people say, yeah, that's interesting, but I don't really know. And I will tell you that it is a requirement today. You can't just know what you know. So it's important, and there's lots of learning that we've had in working in staffing for however many years you've been in it, and things that we should take with us, but we have got to think about some aspects of what we do differently. The first point is define the future or get what you get. So we have 20,000 managers at Microsoft, and let's say half of them at any one time are hiring. So maybe we have 10,000 managers who are making decisions on what we hire at Microsoft, and they'll make decisions based on what they know. So that's you get what you get. But you could also step back and do it very differently and say, here's how I want Microsoft's workforce to be different in 4 or 5 years. So what are some ways that it could be different? Diversity. Require more education. Contingent labor, so I could change the mix between full-time and contingent. Geographically, I could change the mix based on a skill set. So if I wanted to invest more in one business versus another. So if you're able to actually step back and say, hey, we're going to hire half the company in 3 or 4 or 5 years, or we're going to hire 25% of the company in that time, it's really an amazing opportunity. Because you could make a decision as a leadership team. You say, look, here's the 3 ways that I want this business to look different. The second part of this, knowing where you want to go, is knowing the market. Workforce planning, up until 2 or 3 years ago, really had only one side. It was oriented one way at Microsoft. And that way was, how many people would we like to hire? Workforce planning is typically an exercise in, well, what's the demand look like? One of the things that I think we realized a few years ago is that we were missing a whole side of it. And the other side is the supply. So what we did was we undertook a kind of research approach and put together a bunch of data sources. The problem is that when you go out and you do research, and what you find is there's actually no source for that information. And let's say I wanted to find out the number of engineers that are going to graduate in China. And I go and I try to find that information. What I get is, I get this thing in the second bullet, I get stakeholder bias. I'm getting their view of the talent. And they might tell me that, well, there are 800,000 engineers that graduate in China every year from universities. And that might be true, but some of those may actually work on your car, and those are people that we are not interested in hiring at Microsoft. So what was important is for us to take that information and then to develop a methodology for figuring out, how do I look at it in a way that is relevant for us? What this represents is a funnel methodology that we created for taking all this information and then putting it through these filters. We defined them in a way that was important to us. And what we came out with, QFI stands for Qualified for Interview. What I care about is how many of them would be qualified for interviewing at Microsoft. Now I know not just, well, what is the market, but what is the market that I care about? And that is a really important thing to know. It's good to know what's the market look like that you care about, what's my share, but those markets change. Right? So you can't just look at supply and then say, okay, that's great. I know what I'm interested in. I'll come back and look at that in another 4 or 5 years. If you think about the pie of engineering talent that we care about coming out of universities, that pie was shrinking. As my demand was going up, the pie that I was trying to get that talent from was shrinking. And so we needed to figure out what we were going to do. What would be the number one reason for a candidate declining an offer with you. Location, number one for us. So we opened up the Boston Development Center, which is located in Cambridge, about 18 months ago. It's not enough to get a great person in the job. You have to make sure first that you're hiring for the right job. The quality of hiring is a combination of I hired for the right job, and then once I made that decision, I got a great person in. Quality of hire is important to know. So either they're high quality hire, middle quality hire, and low quality hire. And then what we do is we just take a little index. So we say, okay, well, how many high quality hires did you have per low quality hire? And it's really interesting what you find out. Ever since I've been at Microsoft for 7 years, that we've talked about campus as our best source of talent. And you know what? It is. And you look at the quality of hire number, and the number of high quality hires per low quality is like 2.5 times what our average industry hire is. The way that we look at it tells a lot about the quality of the person that we bring in, and it also tells a ton about the source. Last thing, tell your story. It's really important to go out and be able to tell your story, because I will tell you, if you don't, someone else is. So whether or not you decide to create your employment brand, I guarantee you it is being created. And so the question is, do you want to create it, or do you want to let someone else do it? For us, it is important to have a global brand, this kind of, think of it as like an umbrella brand, but within that segment. So we need to be able to talk to candidates, no matter where they are in the world, in a way that's relevant to them. You can't just replay what you know. You have to think a little bit differently.